So this week, one of my heroes passed away. I'm sure some of you could say the same. I first heard Billy Graham in 1972, and it was in Dallas, Texas. I was in high school at the time. I guess I just finished my junior year and drove with about 6 friends straight through the night to get to Dallas. It made an impact on me. I went to Europe and I heard him again in 1975. In fact, I made part of my agenda to get down to Brussels, Belgium, so I could hear him again at a huge conference where we all slept in sleep bags on the floor. And I had chosen to sleep in the German section since I was going to study Germany, and I still have some friends that I keep up with from that time. Do you know that there's an unproven statistic? I'm probably a minister because of Billy Graham. I was pre-law for a while. So I'm a lawyer today. And there's a statistic that says 80% of living ministers have heard Billy Graham in person. Not sure whether it's true, but I bet it's close. What makes him a hero? To some he's not, but to some. What makes him America's pastor? What makes him one of 4 private citizens to lay in state at the Capitol? That'll be a great discussion if you're in small groups. Take it up this week in your small group. What makes a hero sometimes doesn't get to the front page, and you don't hobnob with presidents like Billy Graham did. How many of you remember the name of Aaron Feis this past week? Aaron Feis, F-E-I-S. Beloved football coach who jumped in front of the girls, who was killed. He's one of the 17 who died. Thousands of people went to his funeral on Thursday. He was a hero. What about Anthony Borges? 15-year-old. Remember the picture of him? He talked about immigration. He and his family are from Venezuela. And what his fellow students said of him, a 15-year-old, was he took the initiative to just save his other classmates. He took 5 bullets. And they're giving him credit for saving 20 lives. And he's still in recovery and should recover. Why is it that our culture doesn't put their names up in the front headlines? And we keep seeing the name of the shooter. Who's the hero here? One thing we learned about in our group, we're hosting a group on Wednesday nights. As you learn, if you're not in a group and you still want to be, I'd encourage you, get involved. So the theory is that we have a sermon on a topic, and all the groups that week talk about it, dialogue. That's the topic. And I'll send out my whole sermon to the group leaders. You can pick a phrase or something. It's supporting the discussion. There's still room. Some of them are filled, but there's still room. So the question is, the point that we learned last week was that many people have different definitions of heroes. They come in all shapes, sizes, times. The obvious ones are Jesus is a hero. Someone said William Shakespeare, Abraham Lincoln. There are many of them that were mentioned, but the one that I liked best in our group on Wednesday was the one who said, the one who's the greatest hero to me is the one who gave his life for this country. Great answer. That generated a whole lot of discussion in our group as to what a hero is. And then some people mention heroes which are never lived, like Sherlock Holmes or Indiana Jones. Someone mentioned Mary Poppins, but like I said, all shapes and sizes. Some of the young people went for more fictional heroes like Jason Bourne, and Harry Potter. Those were the big ones. And our book is focusing on some of the heroes that are called, he calls them the pop culture heroes. So last week was Batman, this week is Spider-Man. I just talked to someone who went to see Black Panther, because I wanted to go see Black Panther, and he said it really was fascinating because of all of the moral story here. And I want to see why is this person the hero now that we're studying the heroes. So I'm going to do that in the next couple of weeks, so Mike can bring that up. And they really enjoyed the movie enough to say, if you go, it's not, I'll go with you. We'll go a second time. So what makes a hero for you? You had to talk about it if you were in a group last week. But if you're not in a group, what makes a hero? How would you understand that? Great intelligence, unusual ability, tremendous courage. How would you answer that? And I think of three things that make a hero. And the first thing, that heroes know what is right. They know the difference between right and wrong. They know in that situation what is right, a particular situation. And secondly, though, that hero is probably faced with a decision because there's probably some kind of a fear. There is some kind of a consequence if they're to make a decision. There might even be danger. Could be death. That they know what's right, but there's something that might be keeping them from doing that. But the hero is the one who, thirdly, does it anyway. So they know what's right, there's something that might impede them, but they do it anyway. That's my understanding of a hero. And in his book, one that we're studying by Matt Rawls, he looks just like Matt Wilcox. You don't see the bald head, you know, the whole thing right there. Matt, I thought he could, and we all made mention of that, and I have to give Matt a good time about that. But he makes several good points, just to bring out a couple of them. These heroes, they all have principles or a basis from which they make their decisions. We in the religious world would call that faith. That's not always the case in the hero, but that's the bottom line. And Peter Parker, who is the one who gets bitten by the spider and becomes Spider-Man, as he is watching his uncle die, his uncle says this statement to him: with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Think about that, because this is what leads Peter Parker in his understanding to distinguish more clearly the difference between right and wrong, and then chooses to fight for the cause of the right. It reminds me a lot of that passage in Luke 12, which says, from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. So, heroes have some sort of principle by which they make their decisions, but heroes also have temptations. Think about the foes that they fight against, or the choices they have to make, or the circumstances that present themselves, and they tempt the hero to not do what is right. Think of the sports heroes. How many sports heroes are taking performance-enhancing drugs? Well, it's a huge temptation. You want to make the top 10 or you want to make the top dollar, you got to get dropped up. Even Iron Man has the temptation of alcohol in his life. It's very apparent in every movie. Jesus, he's tempted for 40 days in the wilderness by the devil. Overcoming these various temptations is many times one of the passages on our hero's journey. But the topic, excuse me, that I really want to get into on Wednesday is the topic of sometimes, even though heroes know what is right, they break the rules. was an example in the book that that Matt Rawls gave from December 1st, 1955. I remember it well because I was 9 months old. And it was in Montgomery, Alabama. And the example is Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, after a long day of work, chooses not to get up out of the seat for a white man. At that time, that meant that she was defying the law, for which she was arrested, and about which she says this very telling statement. She says, "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired. That isn't true. I was not tired physically. No more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old. Although some people have an image of me as being old then, I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in." What a powerful statement. Rosa Parks' refusal to give in was a powerful example of what the gospel looks like in action. She was breaking the rules for all the right reasons. The whole question then is, when is it the right thing to do to supersede the law? Drop down with me just a notch so that we're staying within the law. When is it the right thing that you and I join those marching on the state capitol, or that we will go march with those on Washington, D.C., or that we support a sit-in, or a walk-in, or a strike? Do you know one of Billy Graham's greatest regrets as a very old man? He regretted not having chosen to walk at Selma, Alabama. Billy Graham. Not who you would think normally as a social activist. See, heroes know the difference between right and wrong. They usually follow and maintain law and order. But Rawls says this, the author of the book: "But the work of Jesus was deeper than that. Jesus' work was about understanding what the law really means, opening it up to wider interpretations, and bringing it to fulfillment on the cross." Which leads to how Jesus teaches this message through the familiar story of what you and I know of as the Good Samaritan. Even the most biblically impaired person has heard of this term, the Good Samaritan. It has a boatload worth of moral possibilities, and it's even in, I would say, every state's law books. The Good Samaritan law keeps you from getting sued. You go help somebody. And the hurdle that most of us in this room have to get over is that we're familiar with this story. The plot, the characters. We're familiar so much so that it pretty much tames the radical message that Jesus is trying to share. So I want to read the story from a different translation, The Message, from maybe you haven't heard it in that way. It'll be on the screen, and listen to God's word to you. Just then, a religion scholar stood up with a question to test Jesus. "Teacher, what do I need to do to get eternal life?" To do. He answered, "What's written in God's law? How do you interpret it?" The lawyer said, That you love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and muscle and intelligence, and that you love your neighbor as well as you do yourself. Good answer, Jesus said. Do it, and you'll live. Looking for a loophole. Remember I told you he's a lawyer. Looking for a loophole, he asked, and just how would you define neighbor? Jesus answered by telling a story. There once was a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. On the way, he was attacked by robbers. They took his clothes, they beat him up, and went off, leaving him half dead. Luckily, a priest was on his way down the same road, but when the priest saw the man, he angled across to the other side. Then a Levite religious man showed up. He also avoided the injured man. A Samaritan traveling the road came on him. When he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfecting and bandaging his wounds. Then he lifted him onto his donkey. He led him to an inn and made him comfortable. In the morning he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take good care of it. If it costs any more, put it on my bill. I'll pay you on my way back." What do you think? Which of the 3 became a neighbor to the man attacked by the robbers? The one who treated him kindly, the religious scholar responded. Jesus said, "Go and do the same." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen. Now, if you want to read that story, at least the first half, again, the dialogue between Jesus and the lawyer, go to Matthew 22 and Mark 12. What you won't find in those 2 renditions is the rest of the story of the Good Samaritan, unique only to Luke. And that's why I love Luke's version more, because Luke provides more dialogue between Jesus and the lawyer. And I always say it's in dialogue that your faith grows, when you're talking with each other. So here it is. The lawyer asks Jesus a question. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus, in good rabbinic style, gives a question back to the lawyer. And then, if you notice, Jesus allows the lawyer to espouse his scriptural knowledge by sharing the very verses from Deuteronomy 6 and Leviticus 19, which Matthew and Mark have Jesus quoting in their versions. Luke has the lawyer quoted in his version, to which everyone else can hear that the lawyer knows his stuff. So even before the telling of the Good Samaritan story, Jesus has allowed the lawyer to demonstrate his legal learnedness. This is really important. The lawyer knows what is good. The lawyer knows what is right. Okay? He just proved it. But then Luke takes us a little further with this discussion between Jesus and the lawyer. And it's evident that there's some kind of a verbal jousting match that is going on here, with the lawyer anxious to show off what he knows about all these 613 laws in the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible called the Torah, as he would be able to tell which are the greatest. But he is anxious to show off a little bit what he knows, and maybe he'll even trip up Jesus, which is where Eugene Peterson says he's looking for a loophole, but where other translations says he does this in order to justify himself. So the lawyer asks, and just how would you define neighbor. Or, in the more familiar translations, who is my neighbor? Now, in asking that question, the lawyer gives a whole lot away. He reveals that his previous recitation of the greatest law, Deuteronomy and Leviticus combined, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbor as yourself. That previous recitation of the great commandment was just that, a recitation. This is why Jesus doesn't answer his question directly. It is wholly inappropriate. Anyone who truly lived and breathed this greatest commandment would never have to even ask such a question as who is my neighbor. The story that Jesus shares does not actually demonstrate or answer who is my neighbor, but rather it answers a much more genuine question: how should I love my neighbor? How should I love my neighbor? The parable of the Good Samaritan confronts the lawyer, confronts all those listening to it, confronts you and me right now with the challenge to go beyond the simple request of obedience. And instead, despite what others might think about you, despite of the fear around, despite of the dangers, despite of the circumstances, that you would spontaneously, even recklessly, reach out and care for someone doing the right thing. Jesus now responds directly to the lawyer's first question way back here in verse 25. What must I do to inherit eternal life? What he must do is live these commandments, and then he shall live. The question is not who. The question is, how should I love my neighbor? Jesus' disciples at this time, you just imagine them all around him. They're all kind of looking at this joust going between these two. And the disciples and the other listeners were probably secretly smiling or rejoicing that, wow, Jesus is audacious. He used two members of the religious establishment and made them the bad guys. It's like the Presbyterian and Methodist ministers. Okay? They're the bad guys in the story. They went around the side, didn't do a thing. And all those people, the disciples and the listeners, you see, they would have been shocked when Jesus introduced as the hero of the story a Samaritan. Well, heck, it was only one chapter before that John and James asked Jesus permission to rain down fire on one of the Samaritan towns because they wouldn't let them in the town. There's a lot of animosity between the Jews and the Samaritans, as you know. In fact, despising Samaritans was kind of like a pastime for Israelites. These people crossed all boundaries and status, class. They didn't like each other. So then you got to think, well, now if that's so true, if the priest and the Levite had every reason to stop and help this guy on the side of the road because they were the religious people, well then doesn't the Samaritan have good reasons not to stop and help the guy? Think about it. First of all, the wounded guy is probably not a Samaritan. You're in Judea, you're between Jericho and Jerusalem. He's probably not Samaritan, which means that if he were well, he would normally revile the Samaritan, who is now his only hope. Plus, the traveling Samaritan has a very valuable beast of burden. It says it's a donkey. It could be an ox. It could be a something very valuable that he's got there on this dangerous road. The Samaritan also has cash. He's carrying some money. Just later on, he's going to give the innkeeper 2 silver coins. He's on a road that the proof that there are robbers there is lying on the side of the road. He's still in danger, possibly. You know, what does he do? The Samaritan not only turns aside to help this man, he takes time and expends compassion for him right there on the road. It says that even before moving the man to the safety of the inn, he administers rudimentary first aid. He used some wine as a cleansing agent, alcohol in the wine to clean the wound, oil as a cleansing agent as well. He did some kind of bandages for cleanliness and safety, comfort. And only then, after he takes care of him right there, still within danger, you don't know, then he puts him on the donkey and takes him to the inn. Talking about doing what is right, even with fear of possible danger around, he's the hero. And then at the conclusion of this parable, Jesus confronts the lawyer with yet another question. What do you think? Which of the 3 became a neighbor to the man attacked by robbers? Obviously, the lawyer only has one answer, one possible choice, the Samaritan. As his final answer to the lawyer's earliest question about what he must do, Jesus now concludes by proclaiming again, "Go and do the same." The Christian calling is not about being right. It certainly isn't about constantly being wrong. Our role is to continue this story by doing what is holy. Just like the hero of this story. To stop, to care, to nurture, to love. This is holy living. Let's pray. Lord, may we each seek to be holy in showing love to our neighbors, so that our story might someday be titled The Good Highlander. Amen.